G'day all. Just got out of Captain America Brave New World. Not a movie I was planning to see at all, but sort of spare of the moment. I happened to check movie times, saw advanced screening tonight, and just said to the wife, what the hell, let's give it a go. We haven't really been enthused with Marvel since Endgame. I don't want to say before they even made anything after Endgame. For me, my personal headcanon, I was already planning to get off the train at that point. Growing up with comics, I started reading back in '93, and I loved Captain America. You know, I wasn't huge into Iron Man. He was more of like my dad. The movie was kind of what brought him around for me, which I think it was the same for a lot of people. I loved the Hulk. I loved Hawkeye. I didn't really care about Black Widow, and I loved Thor. You know, I was very into the ye old English from the classic comics. So for me, the movies already kind of had the majority of the characters that I really cared about, and with their story coming to a close, I wasn't really enthused on the universe as a whole. I've never been a continuous franchise kind of guy. I like the beginning and end of a story. You know, so for instance, Supernatural. I'll admit, I watched all 15 seasons. I'm really into Sam and Dean, like the Jensen Ackles and Jared Padalecki. They carried it mostly for me, but for my personal headcanon, seasons 1 to 5. That was the core story. Everything after that to me is kind of like, yeah, I watch it, I enjoy it, but it doesn't exist in the core canon. So that was the same thing for me with Marvel. Up to Endgame, I was like, right, that's my core canon, and I'll still watch what comes after, but I've already had my exit ramp, so I wasn't really invested. And then I started to watch what came after, and I just wasn't into it. It felt like, to me, they didn't have a direction. Whereas from the very first Iron Man movie, I felt that there was a roadmap behind the camera. I felt that every scene and everything that they did was building this universe, was building a story. Now, I'm not sure, maybe they did, maybe they didn't. From the kind of research I had done at the time, it certainly sounded like they had a story and a plan. But maybe they didn't. Maybe they just winged it really well. But I certainly felt after Endgame that the wheels came off the track, like they just felt like they had nowhere to go, and they were trying to piece things frantically together. It also seemed to have culminated in a very tumultuous point in terms of, you know, pop culture was going through quite a difficult phase in itself, and I think they were trying to find what's hot and what's not. And what they did put into stuff wasn't hot to me. You know, so just a few things. I felt that they were trying to make everything comedic. I like comedy. I like action. I also like serious, deep, and emotionally charged scenes. And I didn't feel like they were really having that. Even by Endgame, I felt like they were making too many jokes. And after Endgame, I certainly felt like serious scenes were always just cut off too soon. You know, there wasn't enough time for the audience to really sit with a moment or sit with the character. It was always really sad moment, joke, you know, and it was corny jokes too. It was the kind of jokes that you get in shows like CSI or NCIS or like these kind of cop shows. You know, it was never funny. It was like, this person died. Well, luckily they didn't die like this. Like it was just stupid stuff. None of it made sense to me. On top of that, like I said, the stories just never really gelled. It never felt like they had a direction in the TV series. Like, for instance, WandaVision, I really enjoyed the first 3 episodes. And then after that, it kind of just went off the rails to me. I didn't enjoy any of the Winter Soldier, or Falcon and the Winter Soldier. That story had just lost me from the get-go. Personally, what I thought it was originally leading to was the Falcon rejecting the mantle of Captain America and choosing to stay his identity. I'm the Falcon. And I was like, oh, well, that's a great idea. You know, maybe someone else can take up the mantle, but I love the idea of him staying the Falcon. Now, I know that in the comics, they eventually made him Captain America, but I also didn't really like that storyline anyway. So it wasn't, just because something's in the comics doesn't mean that I adhered to it as a comic reader. You know, there's plenty of storylines in comics that I just thought was silly. But look, he took the mantle. I didn't think it was going to work. And, you know, so look, I went into this thing, everything stacked against it. Apart from No Way Home, I can't think of anything MCU related, TV or movie, that I personally really enjoyed. Look, I know a lot of people hated it. I totally understand why. I personally I didn't hate the Eternals. I didn't think it was good, but I sat through the entirety. Okay, so take that for what you will. I didn't think it was trash. I just thought it was pointless. I was like, why? You know, the Guardians of the Galaxy worked because you had it was just kind of like a perfect storm. You had a director people knew, you had a cast that people knew, and even though it was characters that most people didn't know, you had enough pieces put together, and you had songs that people knew. People completely underestimate a good soundtrack. You know, when you hear a beat or a song or a lyrics that you know, I mean, you've already got a part of yourself engaged with the movie. And James Gunn's soundtrack, or just the creative team soundtrack for Guardians, was just so built into like pop culture zeitgeist already that it already had your attention. So everything around it made these unknown characters known. We left it going, wow, the crap, that was great, I love it. The Eternals didn't have that. They didn't have a soundtrack that already caught your attention. They didn't have a creative team that I felt was well known. It's not that I don't think they weren't known at all. I just don't think it was well known. And I think, again, in terms of the actors, yes, you had Angelina Jolie and Salma Hayek. You did have actors that were well known. But I also think you just didn't have the full ensemble. You know, I think you can get away with one or two people that are kind of unknown. I just don't think there was enough people in it that were in the pop culture, sphere enough to grab enough people. But that's just my personal opinion. But I didn't hate the film. I just didn't think it was great. Another one that did surprise me was, surprisingly, I know, throw your stones, The Marvels. I hated Captain Marvel. I thought that movie was just trash. So I went into The Marvels, like, we specifically put it on to laugh at. And we both kind of got to the end of the film and said, I don't think we hated that. That wasn't awful. They dialed down a lot of the stuff that we hated in Captain Marvel. And again, whilst I felt the film was like everything else in the current MCU run, why? Like, what are you building towards? I don't see a picture. But as a standalone, we did have a bit of fun with it. I will admit, throw your stones, but I got to be honest. But again, we went into this, no hope. We really kind of just went, at worst, it's going to give us a film to laugh at. At best, it might be subpar, which is okay. So we went in, we watched it, we got to the end, and I got to say, Brave New World, I didn't hate it. First things first, I liked the soundtrack. I really enjoyed the music. They didn't have like a lot of. There was a mixture of instrumental and a mixture of kind of pop culture songs, and I like what they chose. I liked the music pieces that they had done. I thought the music went well with the scenes. I think what they did with Sam Wilson's Captain America was pretty decent. Yes, I saw the interviews leading up to it, and I was just as skeptical as everybody else. To me, Captain America is Captain America. He's not Captain Planet. Okay, I'm 100% behind that culture thought. All right, Captain America represents me as an Australian just as much as he represents anybody else, but he's still red, white, and blue. Truth, justice, and the American way, just like Superman. So I didn't like the comments made outside of the film, but I didn't feel like that was portrayed in the film. I still felt like he was Captain America, and he did his due diligence by protecting everybody. I also felt like they did a pretty good job, making Captain America his own. Like, I felt like they made a clear distinction between Steve Rogers and Sam Wilson. And I felt like they made a distinction between Captain America and Captain America. You know, again, me personally, I felt that they did do a good job creating his own shoes rather than having to fill someone else's shoes. I also thought that Harrison Ford did a pretty good job as Thaddeus. His story, I think the reshoots kind of showed. Like, I think you could feel the editing in the film, because there was just some scenes that, or some storylines that I kind of just felt a bit disjointed to me. But I also think that the end editing did make it flow enough. What else? Okay, so I think they kind of failed on the villain aspect of the film. I just don't think they introduced the villain enough. Like, what I mean by enough. So, take Iron Man 2, for example, when they introduced Whiplash. They created a origin story that they showed you, and then when you're introduced to him, you're like, yep, I know why this guy's pissed off. I know why he wants Tony dead. I know why he wants to see the world burn. Same with Iron Man 1, Obadiah Stane. You know, you got a good picture why this businessman was the way he was. Same with Thor when they introduced Loki's villainous side. Same with Captain America with Red Skull, or Guardians of the Galaxy against Ronan. Like, all the villains were introduced in a way that made you go, yeah, okay, they're established, and I get why they're fighting them. I didn't feel like this movie did that with the villain. I kind of felt like, hey, I'm here too. You know, it kind of felt like an after, like, we need to have a villain. But look, he wasn't awful. Like, I didn't have a problem with it, other than the fact that I was kind of like, oh, okay, you're here. That's fine. I thought the action was great. I did enjoy the action. The CGI is exactly what you expect from a modern day Marvel film. It was kind of bad, really. I didn't think the CGI was flash hot at all. But it also wasn't... I think there was 2 or 3 scenes that I was like, that's really jarring at how awful it is. The rest of it, I was just kind of like, yeah, it's kind of what I expect from Marvel. So, whatever. I can turn my brain off for it. I didn't think that there was... Oh, no, not didn't. What did I think? I really enjoyed 3 things in particular. 1, they cut out a lot of humor and held scenes with poignancy. So, again, it was something I complained about earlier, was that I just felt like they were getting too jokey. I'm just not into the jokes. Let me hold an emotional scene. And they did that in this film. There was moments where something happened. There was an emotionally charged scene between actors, and they held it. They didn't undermine it with a joke. To me, that was them listening. We hear you, we're making changes. Because I know I'm not the only person that's complained about this. So that was 1. The second thing I really enjoyed was that they made constant connections to previous films. My brother even made a comment that, wow, this to me felt like a Incredible Hulk 3. Like, he felt like it kind of tied up a part of Banner's story. Now, Banner's not in the film, so, you know, but he was talking about his story. And I do agree with him in a sense, and I do appreciate that, which was something I felt was lacking in the Phase 4, are we up to Phase 5? The previous films that we've had post-Endgame. I felt like they weren't anchored to the previous stories enough. But I really felt in this one that they did some really good anchoring to the previous stories, and even the kind of the newer stories that they've made. I do feel like they anchored them really well. Like, this was the first movie I've watched post-Endgame that I was like, okay, I think they're starting to create a fluid story again. It wasn't perfectly executed, but you could see a genuine attempt. And if they're going to try, I'm certainly going to be giving more of a benefit of the doubt as an audience member. Because I don't feel like they were trying after Endgame. I felt like they were I feel like the creative team just went a little too crazy. I want to make my stamp. I want to do this. I want to do that. And it kind of became less about the world as a whole and more about what story do I want to tell. This felt like the world as a whole. And because of that, I was more than willing to go, hey, look, I'll sit back and enjoy this and I'll see where this leads. I haven't been that willing for years. The third thing I really enjoyed was, let's see, there was the lack of jokes. There was the connection to the continuity. I didn't feel, as an audience member, belittled. So I know that not everybody felt this way, but there was a few times in previous Marvel film and series where I felt like I was being mocked for being a fan. And, you know, again, it wasn't in all of them, but I certainly felt like there was a few jabs in the past where I was kind of like, well, why am I watching this? I'm not sitting... This isn't my roast. Why am I getting roasted for watching your product? This is ridiculous. There was nothing in this film that felt meta to me. I really did feel like I'm watching a universe. And again, I've got all the time in the world for a creative team that's clearly doing their best and trying. I felt like they did the anchoring. They listened to the fans. They took out some of the jokes and left some emotional moments. And they did their best to create a fluid story. So, look, it's not a perfect film. I would probably rate it around like Thor: The Dark World. I would say Iron Man 2. But I also have recently discovered how many people loved Iron Man 2 and kind of put it pretty high on their list. So I was a little reluctant to compare it. For me, Iron Man 2 is still kind of like, it wasn't, I didn't love it. It was kind of like there. But I think Thor: The Dark World is probably a good comparison in terms of, I completely acknowledge it as canon. It's not my go-to film when I want to, you know, watch a Marvel film. And I don't hate it. I also don't love it. So that's kind of where I compare it to. Was it felt like a Thor: The Dark World, I'm just going to say Iron Man 2-ish type of film for me. But honestly, that's like the biggest praise I could possibly give it. Because anything post Endgame was kind of like, I didn't even want to put it on the tier list. So look, I have no problems recommending this film for people to see. It's not a perfect film, but honestly, if you ignore the, I just think actors need to stop making commentary. I think if you do it in interviews, just smile and wave and say, I had fun, it was great, good cast, good Piru, you know, we care about the fans, thumbs up, see you later, you know. I think his comments about the cap, you know, not being, you know, like the America part shouldn't be concentrated on. I kind of understand what he was trying to say after seeing the film. But the fact of the matter is, like, maybe just don't say it, you know, let the audience come out and go, I kind of felt like he was a Captain America for everybody, rather than telling us before we went in there, you know. That way other people don't have to do damage control. But no, look, and the other thing I will leave it on is, I really do think Anthony Mackie was fantastic. And I do understand what they meant by his superpower being empathy, which is one thing I will quickly tie on. So one of the things I struggle with is that he's not a super soldier. Now, I get it. Hawkeye wasn't a super soldier. Black Widow wasn't a super soldier. Even Iron Man wasn't a super soldier. So no dramas him doing superhero stuff. My issue is he didn't come out of these things like battered and bruised and tired and looking like, even during the fight, being like, oh my God, this hurts. And I get that he's got the whole vibranium suit thing going on, and that probably is absorbing a lot of the damage. But the bottom line is he's still human, you know? So that was one of the things I loved about Hawkeye. Yeah, he's doing this. But you can see him going like, oh my God, like I'm wrecked. And he's holding his back and he's like, this is really painful. And even Natasha, you can see her visibly exhausted in a lot of scenes, but still going. But the fact was, they let us know they are human and they are tired But the fact that they're still going is what makes them superhuman. I don't like it when you have a human doing superhuman feats and not showing anything at the end of it, you know. I'm trying not to give any spoilers, all right? So, but there's a scene where he's like shot or stabbed and he's still walking around like it ain't nothing but a chicken wing. No, you're a human, okay? You're hurt. That's gonna hurt. You don't just walk around and be like, yeah, I'll just walk it off. You don't have healing powers. You're in hospital now, you know? So there was times when he did that I was really like, look, I get there's the whole suspension of disbelief, but the fact of the matter is you've established it in your own universe. You've shown us humans fighting in these situations and they're hurt and they're tired and they need to rest, you know? So you can't now flip the switch and be like, well, no, now that he's got the suit on, he's okay, he can handle it. No. All right, it's one thing for the suit to absorb damage and he might be able to last a bit longer. If there is skin penetration, he's hurting, you know? And maybe I can get away with like a shoulder wound and him being okay, but you can't get away with a shoulder wound and an abdomen stab and something else going on and acknowledging that he's got a couple broken ribs and still having him walk around, all right? So I think they need to do something there because I get that he's Captain America and he's going to need to be in, you know, Captain America, for all intents and purposes, is a tank. He's going to be first one in. But I still think you got to make it realistic, right? You got to have this guy going. There's a reason why I won't be able to do this forever. Like, even the Batman, you know, he had a 10-year run in the Christian or the Bale universe. And by the third movie, he's got knee braces and he's got a cane. And he's like, yeah, it really messed my body up. Well, Falcon's already been at this for about the same around when he was introduced, 2014. He's been at it for 10 years, maybe even 15 in their universe, you know, although he was snapped. So 10 years he's been at it. You're going to be sore, you know. You don't have super magic healing powers, and they haven't shown us him taking some super Wakanda healing routes, you know. They haven't shown us anything like that. So I have to assume his body is hurting. So look, but that's a pet peeve. Again, I understand the suspension of disbelief, superhero movie, yada, yada, yada. But anyway, look, I can recommend this film. I really think that if you're able to kind of, and I know this might be tough for some people, if you're able to drop the expectation or even just let go of some of the hate you're expecting and actually just go in and give the film a chance. You know, like I said, I went in there expecting to hate this thing and be laughing. I'm pleasantly surprised. I would love to see where they're taking this, because to my understanding, they're going to do a reset eventually. So, but they're clearly building something. Like, this film felt like, okay, it's the first one in a new series. But if you're going to do a reset, what's the point? So I'm interested to see where it goes. If you guys have seen it, let me know what you think. If you're planning to see it, let me know what you think after. All right, sorry about the audio setup. I'm having to use my phone. I cannot get my microphone to work for the life of me. It keeps cutting my voice out, and I'm guessing it's a noise gate issue, but I'm not tech savvy, so it's going to take me a while to troubleshoot this thing. So, phone it is. All right, thanks everybody. Catch you later.